I think that there are two different ways to understand the whole project of the temporal part of Division 2, and that is a Blattner way, which is really a Kantian way, which is asking about being as that on the that determines beings as beings, and he asks about that there's going to be some kind of structure, and it's going to provide a kind of explanation. And I said last time, and I'm still trying to figure it out, that doesn't feel right to me. If the other half of the sentence is that being is that on the basis of which being is already understood. And what one ought to be getting is a phenomenological description of that, not some explanatory Kantian-like structure which tells you how come there is cause and substances and objective time in terms of rules for synthesizing experience. It's not, I mean, it somehow, that's the wrong, any attempt to say that this is a kind of explanation it doesn't feel right. So, but then, what is primordial temporality? I mean, this is the question. I tell you, this is a very peculiar lecture in the sense that I'm going to talk about stuff that I don't really understand at all. The question really is, what is primordial temporality? And this is again related to last time. I want to say that it's a phenomenon that you ought to be able to describe, and it's that on the basis of which beings and Dasein are already understood. That's very different. And another way to put the way Bill and I differ is, again, there's two ways to go. He knows that the worauf hin, which gets translated all kinds of ways in this translation and is hopelessly messed up, but there are two right ways to translate it. That on the basis of which is how I understand it, and he keeps saying that in terms of which is very different. He wants to explain some kind of, put something in some other words. I guess that's what in terms of which means, literally anyway. And I want to say, no, that's not it. You want to describe a phenomenon so fundamental that everything else happens on the basis of it. That is, Dasein can be inauthentic, Dasein can be authentic, Dasein can cope with the ready-to-hand, and so forth. And I want to relate that, and this is what I was saying before, while you were gone, Eugene, to this puzzling remark that ought to settle something between Bill and way of reading it and me. On page 383, which is full of strange things, about 8 lines down, the ontological source of Dasein's being is not inferior to what springs from it, but towers above it in its power from the outset. In the field of ontology, any springing forth is degeneration. I don't know what that means. Do you have any idea? But I want to say that it must, I want to read it. I don't know how Bill is going to understand it. But I want to read it as saying, well, the richest experience or phenomenon, let's say phenomenon, is temporality temporalizing itself. And that's going to be the basis on which all the rest takes place. And you're going to be always sort of leaving out the most fundamental basis when you describe all the things, the levels of stuff that can take place on it. I don't know. I leave you that. Anybody who can write a paper on that sentence, that would be very nice. I'm going to go on. I want to say, and I'm trying to make a certain case, and I didn't run into anything in the chapter that just stopped me cold. Although I did run into a question from Eugene, which almost stopped me cold, but I think I have an answer for it. I'll get there in a minute. But I want to say that that on the basis of which everything that is understandable gets understood, and everything that you can cope with gets coped with, is the background coping. The background coping is a very peculiar phenomenon about which Heidegger never said anything very helpful in Division 1, and I don't think he said anything very helpful about it in Division 2, except that he says it's very dark and he can't say anything about it. But What it is the fact that whatever this background coping is, it's more basic than intentionality. It's more basic than any kind of structure. It's in a certain way extremely simple, but hard to get a grip on. It's a kind of coping practice which doesn't have success conditions. It doesn't even have improvement conditions. It's a kind of coping which is just finding your way around in the world. Or, to take his usual local case, finding your way around in a familiar room. On the basis of that orientation and familiarity, you can have intentionality, you can use doorknobs and open windows, you can stare at the doorknobs and describe their properties, you can do all the kind of intentionalistic things, both primordial, remember he has two kinds of intentionality, primordial intentionality, which is coping with the ready to hand, and conceptual intentionality, which is dealing with the unready to hand and the present at hand. All that takes place on a background of coping, which he says temporality is not itself a kind of intentionality, but it's what makes intentionality possible. I can't remember where that is, but that's definitely something that he says. And it's got to be unified. It gives you a world. And how to describe the background coping practices when you're as they are a phenomenon, when you're actually absorbed in coping with them, is the question, I think, of this chapter, though it never comes out so clearly. Because in the end, you've got to keep your eye on the end of the chapter to see why this makes sense. In the end, it turns out that what one wants to understand is transcendence. Primordial temporality is what makes transcendence possible. And there are three kinds of transcendence. I'm jumping way ahead, but now that I've started, I want to say it. Because there's transcendental, there's transcendent, and where are they all? So there's transcendence of the sort that goes out of the subject toward the object. That can't be it. There's transcendental of the sort in Kant, which is a structure that holds the world together and things together and makes experience possible. It can't be that. So, but it's something which he calls transcendental. The end of the chapter, transcendental has disappeared from the book. I have to call in somebody to find it. Where there's a section which we were just ready for, called, with transcendental in the title, the one you asked me about. Where is it? It's gone, and it's because you asked me about it that we're in this. I'm way back there. Okay, I'm in the wrong area. Page 415. Yeah, well, no, there are two ends. That's the temporal problem of the transcendence of the world. That's where we're going to end up. But I can tell you, somehow if you describe this phenomena on the basis of which we can cope with and encounter anything that we encounter, if you describe it right, you're going to be able to understand how Dasein is its world existingly. That is, how Dasein isn't a subject that goes outside of itself. That would be the traditional kind of representational intentionality. It isn't even a coping something that deals directly with things, which would be Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty kind of primordial intentionality. It's even more outside of itself than that. Just to read you the place where this comes out clearly. That Dasein is the world existingly is one of the places. But now I have to go back to I remember it's 477. No? Now I'm trying to find the place where he says that Dasein is the outside itself, in and for itself. Well, if I did this in the right order that I wrote it, I would have all the pages. So let me stop this and go to the order. Something 77, 377. I got the wrong. I went to 477. Okay, yes. So temporality is a kind of outside itself, more outside, then either the representational intentionality or primordial intentionality, as he says right below 329, temporality is the primordial outside of itself, in and for itself. That's the problem of this chapter. And then that's also really worldhood. That turns out to be the clearing. It gets mentioned in a minute. It turns out to be the open, the there. All of those names are the names for a phenomenon which is more basic than, and that on the basis of which all coping takes place. And okay, and how to describe that phenomenon when you haven't got any of the normal philosophical tools, even intentionality, is what this weird chapter is trying to do. So, and I think Bill has just missed it. And I'll say another thing. I'm saying all the things that I think about it, and then I'll sort of read it in order. It seems to me that this is going to also have to answer this issue about why Heidegger says primordial and authentic when he describes temporality, temporalizing itself. And there's a whole thing in which Bill claims rightly that he must just mean originary because, after all, authentic temporality is intermittent. But I think he thinks, this is what I'm going to argue, that there isn't any way for us to describe, finally, the background, pure coping of our being in the world as finding our way around in the world. The best you can do is find a paradigm case of it, which is the most perspicuous. And that will be a case in which Dasein's temporality and the unity of Dasein's temporality will become actually experienced. It will be a phenomenon. That's what authentic Dasein allows you to say. Lots about the towards which and anticipation, and about the thrownness and the always already in. All of that gets an interpretation in terms of authentic Dasein. And I think the whole point of saying both always primordial and authentic, I think he wants to say it is primordial, and the way we have to describe it is through the way it's manifest, and that is authentic. Now let me just read, because I always getting off from what I'm saying here. So on 385 I want to start. That's what I take to be about the background coping. So look at I want to start with the temporality of understanding. It seems to come out clearly in that. So at the beginning of that little section, with the term understanding, we have in mind a fundamental existentiale, which is neither a definite species of cognition, or not explaining and so forth, nor cognition at all in the sense of grasping something thematically. Understanding constitutes rather the being of the there, in such a way that on the basis, that's I'm sure vorauf hin, on the basis of such an understanding, a Dasein can, in existing, develop the different possibilities of sight, looking around, and just looking. In all explanation, one uncovers understandingly that which one cannot understand, and all explanation is thus rooted in Dasein's primary understanding. And that primary understanding, I think, is this understanding, this familiarity with the world. And it seems to be more basic, more primordial than even the understanding as for the sake of which. I mean, there's understanding as primordial coping, namely hammering. There's understanding as the unready to hand, namely deliberating and such that he talks about. And there's understanding that's even more basic, namely the for the sake of which. And there has to be something even more basic than the for the sake of which, namely that on the basis of which Dasein is the kind of being that can have a for the sake of which. That's what this is supposed to be about, I think. But the best you can get at it, the best you can get at it is to talk about the for the sake of which, because how to talk about the unity of the coping practices that are constantly there in the background and make all intelligibility and all intentionality possible is something he doesn't know how to do, and probably maybe can't be done. Yeah.
I have a link from this. I remember you mentioning way back in Vision 1 course some actually in the beginning, necessary for the logic, that we just sort of have a free, I don't want to use the word preconception because that sounds too positive, but like I like the word understanding because it doesn't imply any sort of.
It does to most people, but we Heideggerians have gotten over that.
For the world and the world, sort of the world is like a sort of just free understanding of how to work with it without any kind of.
You're on the right track. There's a sense in which you and the world are so adapted to each other at this basic level of familiarity. That's got to do with this ecstatical structure of Dasein, which has a horizontal structure too. We'll get back to that in a minute. The ecstatical structure has to do with the way Dasein is open and adapted to the world. And the horizontal structure has to do with the way the world is adapted to Dasein. And there's no distinction. I mean, they're just sort of two sides of the same coin. But it's the nearest thing to the subject-object distinction when you, at the most primordial level, is that there are ecstasies and there are horizons. But it's supposed to be not like the subject-object level, since somehow the ecstasies have horizons and the horizons have ecstasies, meaning that Dasein has this threefold temporalizing structure and the world has some other aspect of the threefold temporalizing structure, and they can't be taken apart. They don't make any sense apart from each other. Now, why was I saying that? But, just because we're talking about understanding. And you made me think. I mean, you realize that from way back, again, I bet I can't turn to it, that familiarity, which never gets thematized much in Division 1, or nor in Division 2, goes to make up the understanding of being. That quote I like to quote from. So you're very near the basic phenomenon when you're talking about familiarity. That's why I think that it might well be sort of a way of talking about the phenomena that he wants to talk about. Remember again, what is the phenomenon he wants to talk about? It's that on the basis of which beings are understood, and that's called temporality temporalizing itself. It's not going to look very much like any kind of time. It's not clock time, it's not world time with its earlier and later, and now it's time for a lecture kind of time. It's not, certainly not physical, one moment after another time. It's not even successive kind of time. So, but it has a three-dimensional structure, and from that. Oh, and because that structure, I guess, is richer than any other structure, you get to call that, and makes into all forms of time possible, you get to call that originary temporality. And that's what we're trying to understand what it is and how we're supposed to be able to talk about it. I like this because it looks like that beginning of understanding is talking about this kind of primary understanding, and the kind of primary understanding is going to be this background hoping kind of understanding, I think. And clearly it's more basic even than anticipatory resoluteness. I have something on 385 that says that. The second paragraph. If the term understanding is taken in a way which is primordially existential, means to be projecting toward an ability to be for the sake of which Dasein exists. In understanding one's own ability to be is disclosed and so forth. And that's, I guess, the primordial existential understanding is, what is that authentic temporality? Is that temporality temporalizing itself? Or does temporality temporalizing itself when it is originary existential? Now, I think that's one version of the way temporality temporalizes itself. That's only one, that's understanding. But they're all going to be aspects of the background coping, I think. If somebody wants to help me, I would be delighted, because I tell you, I think this is very important to understand this very, very difficult book. And I think we've got to understand what primordial temporality is, or temporality temporalizing itself, or you won't understand anything else. I mean, it's easy relative to that to understand authentic Dasein and resoluteness and anticipatory resoluteness and everything like that. That's child's play compared to this. And we don't even understand when we're doing this, and that's where Bill and I are differing, what the job is supposed to be. And at least I think I understand in a way that I'm not sure Bill does, although I hadn't time to read more than the relevant chapter, reread. But I mean, I'm not sure that Bill understands that the whole goal of this is to get a structure which covers both the world and Dasein, such that you can see that it's the same structure from two points of view, and capture both capture the fact that Dasein is its world existingly. That's the job, I think. Now, I saw a hand. Yeah, you. Yeah. Oh, good. You see, how many didn't know? I mean, it's my fault that somebody should speak up. It's the same. It's just the word is ursprünglich, and it gets translated primordial in ours, and Blattner wants to translate it originary. Now, I don't remember, I haven't any quarrel with Bill about that. It isn't as if, I think, although I'm ready to think out loud and entertain it, is it somehow sort of prejudicingly things in the direction of my trying to read it my way, to call it primordial, and his way to call it originary? I think it is. I think it is. He's already built into it that he understands the source as if in some kind of idealist way is built into it already. The ordinary kinds of time arise from this. And I want to say, no, it's primordial. It isn't the origin of these other modes of time. It's more basic than all these other modes of time, and they presuppose it and act on the basis of it. But I don't think that's. I think it's misleading to call that originary. Do you have any feel for the German? That's true. And in the Ursprung des Kunstwerk, which Heidegger wrote later, that gets translated the origin of the work of art. Right. But you're right. Still, I'm ready to just sort of take it. If I could hear it in neutral way, originary meaning basic, then I wouldn't mind calling it originary. Primordial is such a non-illuminating word that you just, to bring in from English if you try to do Ursprung. So that's why I lapse into saying originary, because it feels like somehow it's saying something. However, when I worry about what it's saying, which Eugene just did, it sounds like it's saying something that I don't see any ground in the text. I mean, I see that all these modes of time arise from that. Now you have to go back to 383. That's why I started with 383. Arising from seems to be somehow degenerating from. I still don't understand that. Let's go back and look again in the light of this discussion. The ontological structure of Dasein's being is not inferior to what springs from it. Now, the ontological structure of Dasein's being is what? Temporality temporalizing self, I presume, is not inferior to what springs from it, but towers above it in power from the outset. In the field of ontology, any springing from is degeneration. What is this on my side or on Bill's side? The idea that in ontology, springing from is degeneration. I don't get it. And then let's not go back to this. It does. But let's stick to the question. All I want to say that you did the right thing to ask, and we have to make up our mind. And I think originary, I agree with Eugene, originary is closer to the German, even if it's further from what I want to say. Yeah, you want to say more? Wait, while you're doing that, just a second, I want to look at this and look at that. It seems to be recording. Go ahead.
temporality. I want to call it the temporality of motions of objects.
Let me say a word about that, and bear that in mind. I mean, if you look at Blattner, by the way, Blattner is the only good book on this subject, as far as I know, and it's a very good book on the subject. That's why that is this book, Dasein's Heidegger Temporal Idealism, and that's why it's worth reading it and sort of dialoguing with it. But Blattner thinks that Heidegger's trying to derive nature time from Dasein time and fails. You're saying, no, there's a succession time in nature, and that's just basic, and it's going to be there, and it's independent of Dasein, and goes on whether Dasein ever exists or not. And Heidegger, as far as I know, again, keep your eyes open, I don't think Heidegger ever says anything about successive time, oddly enough. He says that the Dasein structure, the temporality, is not successive. And he says that from temporality he's able to derive a whole lot of the features of everyday time. And he certainly explains how, because of clocks, we begin to think of time as a succession of pure, meaningless nows. And he can derive sort of our access to that. But Bill thinks he wants to derive that there are pure, meaningless nows. And I think, and he fails, Bill says. I think he doesn't fail because he doesn't even try. But then why doesn't he tell us that he's assuming that, of course, there's a sequence of natural nows? I don't know. I mean, what I really think is he thinks it's obvious. I think he thinks it's obvious that Descartes' space is basic for science, but doesn't get at our spatiality. I think he thinks that natural succession is basic too, and doesn't get at our kind of temporality. But you can't just say what you just said. I mean, or you can, but you're outside of this whole debate, because Heidegger certainly, if that's what Heidegger's doing, then we've got to find some reason to think so. That meaning assuming natural succession. I think there are reasons to think that Heidegger is assuming natural succession. I think I mentioned this before. My favorite quote at the very last paragraph of the History of the Concept of Time, Heidegger talks about the time-free movements of nature. And that, whatever that is, I think that's like Cartesian space. I think he thinks that's just there. And he doesn't feel he has to explain it. But you can't just start out with that. If you start out with that, you're going to get in trouble. You have to realize that Heidegger's, you've got to try to figure out how Heidegger could be holding on to a natural succession and why he isn't telling us. Yeah.
So, if he needs to hold on to a natural succession, I mean, it's very, very natural.
Yeah, right.
Just to provide a different perspective, and maybe suggest why he might not want to mention it at all. I was reminded when I first read this of a quote from Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigation, where he mentions, just in this small quote, we like to say that animals don't talk because they don't think, but really they just don't talk. And I'm reminded of this insofar as I want to create a parallel and say, we like to say that things get older because time passes, but really they just get older. And there's a sense that we sort of assert succession onto nature, and things do get older and they change. The succession itself, as we compare to clock time, isn't implied by that. And we don't need to even talk about succession necessarily.
Well, that's going to be an issue for either next time or the time after. But let's not talk about it yet. I just want to say one thing about it to keep your eyes open for it. Just keep your eyes open and see what you think. A very smart undergraduate wrote a very good honors thesis about 3 years ago now, claiming that Heidegger makes a clear distinction between earlier and later, which are relative to now. And now is something we bring into time, just like here is something we bring into space. But there's something more neutral than earlier and later, which is before and after, which we can try to describe without bringing in a now, and that would be nature time. I mean, it's Heidegger's got a whole thing, and this is what this brilliant student found in the Sophist lectures about how Aristotle is confused in his definition of time as to whether it's got an earlier and later or only a before and after, and that sounds very mysterious unless you keep asking yourself whether the now depends on us, and whether you could have a kind of succession without it. So that's all to be put aside. First, you in the back, then, okay, yeah. Wait, on 379, where are you? Okay. Yes, I think, yeah, that's an interesting quote. He does think, it seems, that but of course, anybody in their right mind thinks that time goes on after they die. When you Kant too, and Bill too. So the question is whether time is sort of constituted by us as going on, as a kind of, I don't know, I can't even think about it.
Where he says the problem is rather that of how inauthentic temporality, right? Finite authentic temporality, and how inauthentic temporality, as inauthentic, temporalizes infinite time out of the finite. So, I mean,
that's a good point. Good point. Yeah, Tyler.
The more you temporality is finite, then he's worried about when you find time is somehow based on our finitude, our death, does time go on after we report, time goes on. Finally, if you're studying time to nature, if you're trying to the animal every day, ordinary time, stuff long, maintain, life of death in particular.
Clocks go on and calendars go on, and that sounds right to me, only because if he were really making this strong claim, it sounds like it, I could grant you, if he were really making the strong claim that time, in every sense of time, even just brute succession, depends on us in some way, that seems strange. But on the other hand, if he seems to make the claim that time doesn't depend on us at all, he needs to explain it more. But this is for next time. We are gotten off into exactly what we're not supposed to be talking about. You want to say something, Henry? Yeah. Well, everybody, I don't mind talking about it, because when you read it, you'll at least be clued into what about succession, yeah?
This is accessible.
Where are you? On what page? Okay. Where now? Well, I don't see where you are yet. Right above or below? Okay. Go ahead then. So what do you conclude about that from that?
Temporality, temporalizing. But
the question is, I think the problem is, there is a kind of sequence of nows temporality, all right. He's not going to deny that. The question is whether that is dependent on Dasein in some way, explained in terms of Dasein, or whether that's in nature independent of Dasein. And the question, another way to put it, is on this word accessible. What is characteristic of time which is accessible to ordinary understanding is precisely the fact that it's a pure sequence of nows without beginning and end and so forth. That is, well, I never mind accessible, in which the ecstatical character of primordial time has been leveled off. Well, I don't know how important accessible is. I mean, it's clear that the sequence of nows is accessible to us only by way of leaving out all of the richness of temporality temporalizing itself, and then all you get left, finally, is a sequence of pure nows. Now, there's so many things to worry about there. Is it the pure nows in nature that then we get access to when we leave all this out? I think not. I think now itself is a Dasein relative notion. Then remember, to me anyway, it helps a great deal to keep reminding yourself about space. if you get rid of Dasein, there is no here. But there's still up and down, or at least there are three dimensions, equal and so forth. Whatever Descartes, there's still res extensa, but there's no now. And I think, so to understand it in terms of a series of nows, you could only get there by having this rich notion and getting it more and more degenerated, to talk by that first quote, more and more privative, until all that's left is a succession of nows. I think Heidegger thinks that that depends on us. Not only the intelligibility of it, but the access to it. You look worried. But I don't think the nature time depends on us, because I think nature time has no nows. Now, I have no idea how you're supposed to think about a time that has no nows, any more than I understand how you should think about the time-free movements of nature. But I want to say Heidegger seems to think, that there is a way to think about nature that would strip away the now and the earlier and the later and leave a kind of pure succession that didn't even have a now. But I don't know. And it's funny why we're doing next time instead of this time. Probably because I can understand a little of next time and nothing of this time. Yes, Stephen. Wait, so talk loud, I can't hear you.
That conception of time.
Well, yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you. A pure sequence of nows is what you get from within Dasein's rich temporality, temporalizing itself experience, in which there's pragmatic time, then there's clock time, then there's sequence of now time. All that is somehow relative to Dasein, I think, and that's what you call present or das Man time, which I think that's right. And the question is whether there's a kind of succession even more basic which hasn't got any nows. That's what he entertains in that discussion of Aristotle when he says that Aristotle mixes up the earlier and later, which you have to have a now. You can't have earlier than now without a now, or later without a now. But you can have before and after without a now, in some sense. The number series has, 3 is after 1 and so forth. And nature is going to be in some way laid out in such a way that there being a now in it doesn't make any difference, doesn't show up, doesn't count. And again, just as you can lay out space, nobody thinks it's crazy to think that there's a space in which there isn't any here. So why shouldn't we at least try to think of a temporality in which there isn't any now? You're looking worried. Yeah? No. Okay. But I'm worried because I want to go back to this. Okay? So here we go. I have tried so hard to lay out what the difference between what I'm saying and what Bill's saying, so that you can try to decide for yourself and for me which one is the right way to look at it. So I got to 385. I say the existential condition of the possibility of intentionality is more basic even than anticipatory resoluteness. That's an interesting claim. Where do I get that? I got that out of 385, the second full paragraph. If the term understanding is taken in a way which is primordial existential, it means to be projecting toward an ability to be, what I read before, for the sake of which any Dasein exists. In understanding one's own ability to be, Dasein knows what it's capable of. It knows, however, not by having discovered some fact, but maintaining itself in an existential possibility. What in the world? Well, that doesn't say anything yet about existential condition of the possibility is more basic than anticipatory resoluteness. Let's go on a little. The kind of ignorance which corresponds to this does not consist in an absence of understanding, but must be regarded as a deficient mode of the projectedness. Existence can be when one understands. Well, if it says what I just said it said, I don't see it now. I said existential condition of the possibility of intentionality is more basic than anticipatory resoluteness. That's a pretty clear claim. Why don't I see it? Well, I'm going to put a question mark there. If I figure out what I meant by it, I'll tell you next time if it's important. Probably isn't. So, All explanation is rooted in Dasein's primary understanding. On 385, we just read that one. And now I'm wondering, if there is such a thing as a non-successive structure of background coping, what would it be like to understand it? And now I'm trying to figure out, sort of, one, whether that's what we should be trying to understand, and if so, whether Bill's notion of explaining it is going to help any. I'm on one. He finds this long quote about time in Heidegger's Logic book, which is written lectures given a year before Being in Time, and he says at the bottom of his 105, that is Blattner's, in Logic, his book, Logic, Heidegger gives us an indication that he has something radical up his sleeve, but he does not say just what. And then he quotes, the already and ahead that help to make up care as temporal characteristics do not concern an entity that takes place in time. And then, skipping down, because you heard that, I'm going to read the last part of it, because it gets darker and darker and harder. It looks like Heidegger sees that he's got something to talk about that he can't understand how to talk about it. Care is not only not temporally determined in the manner stated, that is, how. I don't know, but care is not ontologically determined in the manner stated, but rather cannot be temporally determined at all. Oh, of course, care isn't in time. That's the non-successive story. But already and ahead are temporal characteristics, ! Thus, the only remaining possibility is that their time-like sense is not the sense thus far explained, but a different one. But what other sense? I mean, so the kind already explained is all the kinds of temporality that you have when you're involved with things. And now he's asking, what about the background temporality, as I read it? And then he says this, namely, what is this more basic temporality? This is primarily dark, and we stand once again at the beginning of our considerations. Nonetheless, we have one, if not something positive, then at least prohibitively something essential, namely the reference to the idea that, if the already and the ahead are temporal phenomena, the most natural interpretation as now time does not help us. So I'm reading that because it looks like, when he gets to the most basic time-like character, he says he can't explain it. And that's when I want to say that I think, if that's true, that there's a kind of basic coping phenomenon, finding your way around in the world, which is an understanding of being, and holistic, but not intentional, then if there is such a thing, and if Heidegger doesn't know how to talk about it, and he never does talk about it, except to say there is such a thing, but he can't describe it, then I would say authentic temporality is the best you can do, and because it gives us you see in authentic temporality an instance of the unity of originary or primordial, you can have it either way, time. We can make sense of the unity of primordial temporality because we can make sense of the unity of an authentic life. I think that's good, and that's why I think that he spends all this time in Division 2 talking about temporality temporalizing itself as primordial and authentic. Is all he can talk about is the authentic structure of time temporalizing itself and its unity. When he does talk finally about this more basic, on the basis of which of everything, being in being, that on the basis of which everything is intelligible, when he does finally talk about it, he says these very, very unhelpful things about ecstatical unities and horizontal unities and the way they are connected, or sort of aspects of the same something or other. That's an attempt to talk about something very general about time, not just authentic, the temporality of authentic Dasein, but the temporality of everything. The temporality of being in the world, the temporality of the clearing, the temporality of whatever, all these words that he's got for the disclosive openness that is most basically us. We aren't the totality of things existingly, but we are somehow the clearing or opening in which we can encounter ourselves and other Daseins and the totality of things, and that's what he wants to talk about. That's really what he always wants to talk about. The basic ontological difference, as he calls it, is the difference between that opening in which beings become intelligible and every sort of being and every kind of intelligibility, I think. So let me go on. So he's going to describe the unity of the basic openness, and if he is, then that's not going to look like an explanation in Blattner terms. It's not going to it's not something, there's going to be no in terms of which. There's going to be a description of a phenomenon, and what you get is, I'll read the strange stuff that you get when he does it. I was already reading it, but now we've got to be paying attention to how it fits in. At the top of 377, all of this really important stuff happens there on 377. Temporality is not an entity. It is not, but it temporalizes itself. Nevertheless, we cannot avoid saying temporality is, and so we switch to saying temporality temporalizes, and indeed it temporalizes possible ways of itself. These make possible the multiplicity of Dasein's modes of being, and especially the basic possibility of authentic and inauthentic existence. But they're just instances of all the stuff. But that is, again, keep remembering, it's so close to we're talking about being as that on the basis of which beings are understood. All sorts of beings. Now let's go on. The future, the character of having been, and the present show the phenomenal characteristics of the towards oneself, of the back to, and the letting oneself be encountered by. The phenomenon of towards, to, and amidst make temporality manifest as, and now that's the ecstaticon, that's this ecstasy story, that is, that it's the outside of itself, pure and simple. Temporality is the primordial or originary outside of itself, in and for itself. We therefore call the phenomena of the future, the characteristic of having been in the present, the ecstasies of temporality. Temporality is not prior to this an entity which first emerges from itself. Its essence is, never mind a process of, is temporalizing in the unity of the ecstasies. That's what I think is evidence that whatever this primordial temporality is interested in, it's what opens up a space in which anything can show up at all, as anything. I want to read, I've read that. Yeah, okay. And I say on 401, he gets as near as he ever gets to saying what he wants to say. Let's see what that is. Yeah, that's where he puts it together at the middle, right where the italics is. Thus we can see that in every ecstasis, temporality temporalizes itself as a whole, and this means that the ecstatical unity with which temporality has fully temporalized itself currently is grounded. You'll see where, I don't know. That in the ecstatical unity and so on, so is grounded the totality of the structural whole of existence, facticity, and falling. That's the unity of the care structure. And I'm not reading the thing I want yet. Okay, on 402, we ought to now be able to understand being in the world. That's where he's going to put them together. The new paragraph. Only through the fact that being there is rooted in temporality can you get an insight into the existential possibility of the phenomena, which is at the beginning of our analysis of Dasein. That is, being in the world. Skipping a little. The question of the basis which makes the unity of this articulate structure possible remained in the background. So now it's in the foreground. And the basis which makes the unity of this articulate structure possible. Now, that's certainly not authentic Dasein and authentic temporality, because they're intermittent. So Bill and I are both trying to describe what that would be. And I don't really understand what Bill thinks it is. Any of you who read, I mean, I'm trying to understand what the phenomena is that he's trying to describe as temporality temporalizing itself. Yeah. Yes, well, naturally, and so is Bill, but go ahead.
I think it's what Bill Blackman wants to do. What job could we putting it though? What's the phenomenon? What's the determined define the phenomenon? Determined define the phenomenon. You can specify a job that needs to be done. Why?
That's very helpful, that distinction, but I stick to, my end of it. It looks to me like if he just stops with what job does it do, he's not done much. I mean, for instance, if he just says that it unifies all the modes of time and it gives us and so forth, that's fine, but he seems to be trying to ask, and how does it do that? What is the phenomenal structure that enables us to do it? The reason I think he's trying to ask that question, I think you're right. If he stopped with, this is what it does, he'd at least have got somewhere, and that would be nice. But he seems to say, finally, I just haven't got to it yet, that when you really want to talk about it, you finally got to talk about the fact that it's got ecstasies, and it's got a horizon. That doesn't seem to be something it does. Let's go to that. It seems to be something that enables it to explain the fact that we are the world existingly. We're back to that again. And let's see now. Okay, here we are on 416. Now ask yourself Tyler's question. Is when Heidegger finally gets down to as near as he ever gets to talking about, let's start on 415, the heading of the chapter, the temporal problem of the transcendence of the world. He gets a question at the bottom, how anything like the world in its unity with Dasein is ontologically possible. Doesn't that look like the question about how does it do what it does? What sort of thing, I think it looks like the question, what sort of thing does temporality have to be in order for it to do the job that it does? Yes. Yes. Yes.
Temporality reaches two modes. Now I get to the other story. There will be no phenomenon. You can show that you need this thing. Second, you can tell a story about how it does it in the beginning. But there's actually no phenomenon.
Okay, well, in a funny way, I agree half with you. There's no phenomena that you can point to or say anything about, but there's the something or other on the basis of which the first two things. So what's the job that needs to be done? We know that somehow get Dasein and world together completely. What structure enables it to do it? We know that, it turns out. I'm just talking about it in a minute. It's the ecstatic horizontal structure of temporality. And now we want to know, but we can't say anything about, what it is on the basis of which that happens. Now that's where Blattner starts talking about the in terms of which. And I guess that's what you're saying is you could stop with in terms of which if you use the words ecstatical and horizontal, those are the terms. Will you say it once again?
So Dasein temporalizes itself authentically or inauthentically in terms, same with temporality of situation. The big dog is bringing it hand and turning that hand in terms of the unity of horizon of speed. But the way temporality works in that doesn't in terms of. Now all I think it's saying is they must have a common temporality because Dasein knows it. And so there will be an in terms of which a temporality, a similar structure. It won't be, but it'll be the same structure. It'll be a in terms of which.
You can always keep saying a threefold structure anyway. That's the only thing to hold on to. Yeah, even authentic Dasein has a threefold structure. Coping has a threefold structure with equipment, and that threefold structure gets traced back and back until you get the three ecstasies somehow link with or have the threefold horizons. And that's how it all fits at the most basic level. And you can do all that, I'm following you, in terms of just the way I did. But it doesn't seem to me this is a book in phenomenology, and I can't help thinking that Heidegger wants to point us to the phenomenon. And there is a phenomenon, namely this familiarity of the involved coping, which is always going on and provides the clearing for it all. But you may be right. I mean, Bill would turn out to be right if Heidegger isn't even trying to do what I'm asking him to do, but he's satisfied to do what's the job and what are the sort of equipment that you've got for doing the job and how does it do the job, all at a level of terms. And I want to say, no, you've got to do it at the level of phenomena. Again, remember, the question is partly, is being that on the basis of which being is understood, or is being that, is it a structure in terms of which being is understood, is all constantly in the background. I wish I could tell. But I think I like what you're saying in the sense that since I can't give any account of how to describe this familiarity, except that it's coping and it's holistic, then maybe I shouldn't even be trying. And maybe he shouldn't be trying. Yes.
I think that's what far down the road has to do with temporality. It says, we shall point to temporality as something called Dasein. If this is to be demonstrated, those structures of Dasein, which we shall provisionally exhibit, must be interpreted over. So here it seems, it seems like I don't know if it has to be a phenomenon that's vivid so much as when we really, it's going to lay out all, in position one, it's going to lay out all of these structures of Dasein, and then we'll be able to kind of see this pattern start to develop where what we're going to do is it's going to be interpreted. It's not necessarily explain a phenomenon.
So that's more like what Tyler and Bill are saying. I'm asking for something that's just not there. Am I asking for something that there isn't any such thing this on the basis of which phenomena, or am I asking for just something that we can't say anything about and he's not trying, and Bill is right about that?
In the end, I don't know if you're all part in a way. I feel like you're wanting to point to our everyday coping and then wanting to see a phenomena. We can explain that phenomenon in the way that we carry out the things that show the structures of Dasein. In some ways, I think it seems right to me in the way that you're addressing it in terms. But I think that what temporality is doing here is taking that and on a fundamental level saying this interpreting. If we really interpret the structures that are in place,
functioning there,
interpreting these at a deeper, more meaningful level, but they come down to.
Okay, I think that's getting closer. Yeah. If
I just think that it's an interpretive. It's kind of the final interpretation we place on all of these structures. We're going to see it in terms of.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's. I think that may be right. Let me go on but. Let me see where we are. Yeah, okay, we have time. So here we are. We haven't gotten to the place where I claim that he's really trying to describe the ultimate clearing or something like. It could be, I'm just thinking that we're trying to do justice to both. That on the basis of which beings are understood is what I keep wanting to find. That's the ultimate clearing of some sort, the open space. And that in terms of which beings, that which determines beings as beings, that would be the other something structure that Bill is looking for, I suppose. I think we really, and maybe we're supposed to put them together. We discover that in terms that determines beings as beings, and then we discover that points us to some kind of openness, which is a phenomenon, maybe. You're looking puzzled. What I said is puzzling. Yeah, I was hoping to say yes, so that he could combine them, that he can describe that in terms of which all this happens, and he can describe that on the basis of which all this happens. And he may either be trying to do both and not be able to, or not know it, or maybe he's really trying to do both and he knows it, and we're supposed to figure it out that he's doing that. Yes, it's really another way to put it is, is this mostly hermeneutic or is this mostly phenomenology? Isn't that the same? I say, but it's got to bottom out in a phenomena that he can describe on the basis of which everything else is intelligible. And the hermeneutic view would say something like, I guess, it's got to be articulated in terms so that we can see it, make it intelligible. And One of them is make it intelligible. Thing intelligible and to make it possible. And the intelligible is the story I keep trying to tell, and the possibility, and that would be some sort of realist way, and that which makes it all possible, that's Bill's story, I take it. That's the kind of idealism he wants. Is that, or am I missing? I reversed what you said? Yeah, two of them, okay. I saw a hand over here, yeah.
The hermeneutic method you have is singularly stopped somewhere. Like, how do you ever treat that question, like on what it is we stop positing phenomena?
Yes, it's funny that he doesn't explain it much, but he talks about, in Being in Time, he talks about the horizon for understanding being, as if there was a place to stop. But in Basic Problems, in the part that we'll read during the last 3 times, he talks about how there's always a broader horizon in terms of which you could be understanding all this. And I guess that's more than what he should be saying. And given his hermeneutic approach, there's no final horizon that says now we really got it. Okay, let me go back. I mean, somehow I keep not finding the passages here that I definitely want to read before I stop. So let me keep looking. I just found the part which I already said, that what he calls transcendence is going to be something that is not transcending from inner to outer, not a structure like that you could say much about or anything about, but it provides, now this is where I've got these things, it's something that is like a space, a clearing on the basis of which all forms of intentionality take place. And then I say, look at page 415 and see is that where we are? I've got everything underlined on 415, so I don't know what I'm supposed to be reading. So let's see. I'm going to start with the italics about 5 lines down. That inside which Dasein understands itself is there, along with its practical existence. That inside which one primarily understands oneself as Dasein's kind of being. Dasein is its world existingly. And then it goes through this other talk about the there and the clearing. I forget where the clearing comes in, but it does. We have defined being as care. The ontological meaning of care is temporality. We've shown that temporality constitutes the disclosedness of the there, and we've shown how it does so. In the disclosedness of the there, the world is disclosed along with it. The unity of significance must then likewise be grounded in temporality. And then comes this amazing quick move in the existential temporal condition for the possibility of the world lies in the fact that temporality has an ecstatical unity, has something like a horizon. And it looks like we're trying to understand the world and the there and the openness, and in another place what he calls the clearing, and it looks like we're trying to understand also how Dasein is its world existingly. And if somebody can tell me, maybe Tyler more than anybody, maybe, I don't know, where he suddenly gets this business of the ecstasies have a horizon, and that's very important, and it seems to do all the job that hasn't been done. Do you understand that? Yeah, let's repeat that, just because this much is clear. The ecstasies are the whole structure seen from the point of view of Dasein. It's Dasein that has an ecstatical structure, being ahead of itself, already in, amidst, and so, but that is an ecstatical structure. Okay. And that ecstatical structure is a threefold structure and a unified structure, since each of the 3 elements brings in, describing any one of the 3 aspects, brings in the other 2. That's all. And that's how it gives unity to the care structure.
The issue is, he realizes that understanding temporality doesn't get done the job. That it doesn't get, so then we get this whole other, which is not the unity of these facts, but rather, but we describe that as not a unity of these facts. So there's one place in the horizon. There has to be a unity of the horizon. Okay. Yeah, horizon within which those two modes of temporality.
Oh, does he?
On side of entities versus
Oh, gee, we'll put that on hold. You realize that may be temporally Tate, because it turns out that even though originary temporality, which is what we're talking about, has an ecstatical structure from the side of Dasein and has a horizontal structure from the side of coping, so just as there's always a towards which on the side of Dasein, which for the sake of which, there's a towards which on the side of coping that has also got a for the sake of which. And they're different for the sake of whiches, and yet they're the same. Because the for the sake of which, say, being a professor, is on the side of the ecstasies, but the for the sake of which, when you consider not my stand on my being, but the role I've got, that's also futural, and that's on the side of the world. My stand on my being is ecstatical, but the role and the equipment that I am sort of defined in terms of is horizontal, and that's good. That's the sense in which you can't define being a professor either as a subjective thing alone, or a coping in the world thing alone, but that they're really two sides of the same phenomenon or something. That's good. That helps. But where's this other use of horizon? Oh no, I'm sorry. I started to explain it. I don't know where it is in here, but in basic problems, he comes to a more fundamental kind of temporality than ecstatical or horizontal. Namely, we've got a new word for it, temporalitate, and that's supposed to do something more to explain, as you say, the way the two come together, or why they come together, or how they come together. I don't know what. But yes, but that's not in here, is it? This
already talking about a horizon within which only said the axis. He's already drifting towards.
Okay, well let's hope not, or at least let's try not to think about it yet.
In the horizon of, so the question to me then is, in what sense do the ecstasies temporal in the horizon? You can't see the horizon.
Does he say they temporalize within a horizon? Did I? Oh, let me look again. Lies in the ecstatical temporal condition of the possibility of the world lies in the fact that temporality as an ecstatical unity has something like a horizon. Not exactly within it, I think, but just correlated with it. But the other side, temporary. The horizonal schema is the threefold something or other on the side of the world, which corresponds to the threefold ecstatical structure on the side of Dasein. Are we agreeing about that? What I just read, did that get you to where you are? Let's see. Let's go back to 415. No, 416. We've defined being as care and so forth. We've shown that the temporality consists in the world, in the disclosedness of the there, and the world is disclosed with it. The unity of significance, the ontological constitution of the world, must be grounded in temporality. The existential temporal condition for the possibility of the world lies in the fact that temporality as an ecstatical unity has something like a horizon. That just says, I think, what I just said, something like that the for the sake of which is both the future aspect of Dasein and the future aspect of the world, and they have to mesh. Does it say more than that? Remember, what we're trying to get is that amazing sentence at the end of the previous paragraph. Dasein is its world existingly. That's supposed to be both giving you the sort of nearest thing to the subject-object distinction and taking it back, so to speak. There is no way that Dasein and the world can be separated. The temporalizing itself has this two-aspect structure, which is Dasein being in the world. And this is what he wants to explain now. Let's see if I can get any clearer or find another quote. Let's look at the bottom paragraph, first sentence. The unity of the horizontal schema of future, present, and having been is grounded in the ecstatical unity of temporality. The horizon of temporality as a whole determines the whereupon, there's the woraufhin again, so determines that on the basis of which factical existing entities are essentially disclosed. That's the on the basis of which I think of as the familiarity, though he doesn't say that. Does that help any settle this? Let me go on. With one's factical being their ability to there, the ability to be is in each case projected in the horizon of the future, one's being already disclosed in the horizon of having been, and that which one says discovered in the horizon of the present. The horizontal unity of the schemata of these ecstasies make possible the primordial way in which the relationships of the in order to are connected with the for the sake of. Is that helping any? I don't know. Not much. Yeah. Is the German going to cast a light on it? Oh.
I think that this is, as I did this one with this point, and it seems like they have something, because that's such a speed, one world for each dot size, and then you get solipsism. Or there can only be one dot size.
Okay, I got a story about that. I mean, that used to worry me. And I used to think that Dasein was the world existingly, which is the Hegel side. Only in Heidegger it would be Das Mann side. But I used to think, but he says, to my amazement, that Dasein is its world existingly. And then I decided that the way to think about it is that Dasein is a perspective on a shared world. That to be a there is to have, it's just that, not a projection like in Renaissance painting, but that every Dasein has a world which is the same world, but colored differently could be colored differently by its moods and by its horizon or its perspective. Wouldn't that?
You're not saying anywhere that Dasein is.
Okay. I marked the place where he seemed to have done it the other way too, and that's maybe not going to help because he ought to get it together. At the top of 417, we've got. Let me try starting at the bottom of 416. The horizontal unity is so forth and so forth. This implies that on the basis of the horizontal constitution of the ecstatical unity of temporality, there belongs to that entity, which is in each case its own there, something like a world that has been disclosed. He's got the its and the a together in a sentence. Does that solve it, or does that just sort of finesse it? Well, its own there, something like a world. I see. He doesn't say the world. Now, I really wanted him to say Dasein is the world existingly. It seems to me, doesn't it to you, that that's what he should say? We're all open on one world. He better not think that my world is prior to the world. That will get him into Husserl and Sartre right off. Well, no, because I am the world from my perspective and you are the world from your perspective. So it isn't just that we are the world. We are each of us is our take on the world. That's got to be right. I mean, so we're not the world because we're only our take on the world. But we are the world in the sense that it's like that when you see the front of the house, you see the whole house. Just because you see it from a point of view doesn't mean that it isn't the same house for everybody. Is that a big difference? Let me think about it. Wait a second. I have to think about that. Now you are the house. That's a problem. I see what you mean. Well, how are we supposed to save him? You want to help him out?
I think that's supposed to be out of that thought for out of the conditions of existence we've been discoursing on throughout being in time, such that your worlds, although experienced necessarily differently, are also necessarily unified through the unity. Like The defense at the bottom of 416, I feel horizontal and the running unities with command of these makes possible the primordial way in which the relationship is in order to connect for the sake of. There's always a danger that even with our care structure as it's been articulated, that the way Dasein experiences the world through the authentic and inauthentic ways of being is separate.
And that's what you've got to get rid of that.
Combining such that Dasein in the world, we're always that none ever, I guess.
Okay, let me try something maybe the same and maybe not. That I think what he wants to say is the world the world is something that you can be from a perspective, because the world is a clearing in which things can show up, and there is just one clearing. But when you are it, I think maybe even what you're saying, when you are it existingly, then you aren't really it in the sense that you're like the. So let me read something here on 416. Right after that, I think maybe I read it, but if I didn't, it won't hurt. If I did, I'll read it again. Right after Dasein is its world existingly, we have defined Dasein's being as care. The ontological meaning of care is temporality. We've shown that temporality constitutes the disclosedness of the there. See, that seems to be like the world. It isn't your there and my there. The disclosedness of the there, and we've shown how it is so. In the disclosedness of the there, the world is disclosed along with it. The unity of significance, that is the ontological constitution of the world, must then likewise be grounded in temporality. Have we got anywhere? I mean, he seems to be wanting to say that each Dasein discloses the world, and that's compatible with saying each Dasein discloses its world existingly. I mean, I'm just stating your problem, but it's right there within those few sentences on 416. And then he seems, and I want everybody to pay attention and think about this. I mean, that is, I bet, the final problem that this whole thing is trying to get settled. How in the world are you going to get Dasein, which seems to be us, and once upon a time, consciousness and mental representations, all of which he denies, together with the world in a way that doesn't turn it into monadic idealism like Husserl, which he certainly doesn't want to do, like Sartre, where somehow you have to get from my world to the world. No, Dasein is always open and to a world. He has to get his sense that Dasein is open to and coping in a shared world, together with each Dasein has to take a stand on its being and have its for the sake of which. And somehow in these pages right here, he thinks he's doing it. Now lots of hands have come up. If you all want to help him do it, that's good with me. Yo, go ahead.
World, but perhaps relationship is thought of as an immanent one with the world. And I'd like to suggest that the ecstatical unity of temporality has a horizon, but is not a horizontal schema, can be best thought of.
Why do you say that?
Unfolding.
Okay, sort of. Why not say it always exists? I mean, it is never finished, but it's really always going on. Okay.
Genealogically unfolding.
Teleologically. Genealogically. What is that?
That's the way that I guess like anti or post-structuralists would later on describe it, but a way in which, a thing is permanently becoming within the world alongside other genealogical elements that are differentiating themselves, always coming from a past that having been and becoming.
I can't really understand how that's going to solve this very basic problem of how we're going to get ourselves as what was once upon a time subjects related to the world, which was once upon a time objects, in such a way that we can in no way get ourselves trapped into our own stream of experience or our own perspective. Yeah. Yes. Well, I think we've gotten to this deep level where he's trying to explain how it's possible for Dasein to be that kind of being with. I mean, yes, Dasein is certainly in the world with other Daseins, and it's doing that somehow in a way that's tied up with its having its own for the sake of which, and therefore its own take on the world and everything. How is he going to get these two together? And it looks like he thinks he's getting them together right here, but we don't see yet how it's happening. Yeah.
To resolve like the question of possible solipsism or like distancing Dasein from the world, but therefore failing to do what it's trying to be done. I mean, could one say that Dasein shares the world, and thus Dasein is not the world, and not to be identified with the world? But in saying that Dasein is the world existently, that say each individual Dasein, each one of us, could be the world existingly in a different way, and still share the same world. And I guess that would be why I wanted to want. So each Dasein was like a modification upon the world, rather than a separate sphere wherein everything else is.
Yeah, I think somehow we've got to come up with and you're on the right track, the way, whatever a world is, it's something that you can be in such a way as to not be separate from it, and yet not be identical with everybody else who is the world. And we're trying, and surely he thinks here he said something very important about that, namely the business about horizons and ecstasies. I'm beginning to think I sort of understand it, thanks to you all, but I'll wait till you all talk and see if I can say it.
That way of being, his way of being is called Dasein. That existing Dasein is the world. And that seems kind of weird, right? I mean, that's sort of the puzzle he's trying to solve.
Well, I think he thinks existing Dasein is the clearing. I mean, this is the extreme emptiness of the empty mind turned to open to this shared something or other.
How can existing Dasein be the world and within?
It's the world from within it. That's just another of the funny things. Worlds are not. That's how worlds are. I'm in the academic world from within the academic world. That's not a problem. Yeah.
As far as the false is concerned, the way to make things in any way at all. They're not just next to each other or working together. They're still just engaged as to be inseparable, essentially, or something like that. You can't, like, I would make a strong statement that you cannot make.
That's surely got to be right. Yeah.
Try to take the two away from each other. Try to separate them. That's impossible. So I don't think that's that much different. As far as solipsism is concerned, I'm not going to deal with that. That sounds incredibly hard. But, I mean, maybe it's worth mentioning that, of course, the world which Dasein engages in is really the same world which other Daseins engage with because of Dasein. So even if there were to be some sort of separation, there would be some sort of interchange between different Daseins that's formative for each one's world. And also, one more thing I want to say, just on the topic, is we're talking about on the basis of which, and a word that's hit me, which I think is a really good word, just to, as close as I can get to a one-word description of what makes sense to me, is just phenomenal. Like, the word phenomenal, right? This doesn't have to be alien, but, like, I'd like to think of it on the basis of.
Well, maybe, I mean, let me paraphrase it in something that sounds like it makes sense anyway, that your disclosedness, but your disclosedness is your way of opening on to the world. I'm just doing my sort of perspectival thing with other words. Or, I mean, what sense does it mean to say you are disclosedness is somehow something that you can be. You are your disclosing or disclosing, you are disclosing all the time. And it's your disclosing. But what you're disclosing is a world, and worlds are, and the world. What you're disclosing is a shared world with other people and shared equipment and so forth. Why can't you be the disclosing activity of a sharedly, of a one disclosed world. I'm just trying to find a formulation that will work. Yeah.
But when Heidegger lays out the taxonomy of world, and he lays out the third one, which is the important one, the wherein, even within that, he says there's more than, the world can be understood in more than one sense. He says, it's the wherein a factual Dasein as such can be said to live. World may stand for the public the world, or one's own associate's domestic environment. So here it seems like it's not just, world is kind of goes out from the center, and we can extend our world in a way, but it's not.
Okay, but I mean, wouldn't we have the same problem back? Just let's start with the domestic environment, sort of following Eugene's way of thinking. What does it mean to say you are your domestic environment instead of you are it? Well, that's so strange. I mean, I can say you are the activity of disclosing your domestic environment. That seems to be the right way to go. Then, but then he does say and that's the existingly, I guess. You're the world existingly. You are the activity of disclosing or clearing a shared world or clearing. Now I'm just trying to, and why does he think? Let me say something before I thought I was on the right track. I want this, it ought to come out really simple, believe it or not, if you just get the right clue. And I think I was on the right track when I wanted to say that being a professor is both something that I have to do in my own taking a stand on my being, and it's for the sake of which in the referential totality for the sake of which, try to put it this way, something which I surely am. I mean, that defines me. That's my identity. But my identity involves all this shared equipment. And I want to say something like, if you read all this about the future and the for the sake of which, you ought to be able to find out that the Dasein is both self-defined by taking a stand on its being, by having an ultimate for the sake of which, and that's the ecstasy part, and that has as its horizon that there have to be students and equipment and all kinds of public stuff, and that they sort of totally belong to each other. That you start with the ecstasy because Dasein starts with the being and takes a stand on its being, and he thinks that's the most important dimension, the futural dimension. But as soon as you try to say how to describe that, you immediately have to, and that's the ecstasy, you immediately have to bring in the horizon. What is the horizon? It's that sort of public, shared, for the sake of which, and that enables you to say, you are, and how's that related to the world? Well, that's part of a big, complicated structure, which is a world structure. And you've defined yourself in terms of a, so to speak, piece of that world structure, described as your for the sake of which, and you really are that. I'm trying to bring in the identity story. That when you get your identity in terms of something in the future, you automatically bring in that there is something in the future that you're getting your identity in terms of, and it's not, of course, the thing you're ever going to achieve. It's that kind of it's authentic kind of future, being a professor. But is that helping? I mean, I think if you really try to think it out and do it the way he does it, and describe the temporal dimensions of coping and just with equipment, and how that is structured as he does in the beginning, or the equipmental totality, never mind the coping. You describe the equipmental totality, and you describe Dasein taking a stand on its being, and at the beginning those seem totally different. But by the time by the time you get to this page 416 and 417, you've earned the right to say that they're not totally different, that there is some way in which you are defined by the world, but you're defined in your way by the world, and other people are defined in their way by the world. Is that helping any at all? You're looking a little bit enlightened. No? But you don't think it solves the problem. All right, he shouldn't say is. He shouldn't say is the world, right? I think I just wouldn't substitute discloses. If you say Dasein discloses the world existingly, or a world, or its world, I don't think it matters anymore with the notion of disclosing, succeeding. Well, and I want to say, if we read this again, heaven forbid, all through, we'd see that the way he's setting up the ecstasis and the whole thing in terms of Dasein taking a stand on its being and how it's thrown and how it's coping in the present. And he's describing the world in terms of having for the sake of witches and significance and thrownness. He will be setting it up so that these two structures are not just parallel, but they are like two sides of something. I think he's done it. I mean, what I'm thinking is maybe for the first time I'm beginning to understand why he thinks he can just suddenly tell us in italics that every ecstatical unity has something like a horizon, and think that tells us Dasein is its world existingly. It's cause, and I think that's what the sort of thing he's been trying to achieve. Okay, now I told somebody over here somewhere, yeah.
Nobody really brought up that the reflexive type of interdependent nature, because not only that the final for the sake of which is in terms of on the basis of the world itself shows up differently when the final for the sake of which is altered, so it here becomes future from any other final for the sake of which the actual articulation as well. And so maybe in that way is the horizon both interconnected in that way. Future is in terms of Dasein.
And but then, I mean, what Eugene is always worrying about is, but when the chips are down, even with my disclosedness talk, are you saying that you were your disclosedness, or are you saying you're a disclosedness? Are you saying you're the disclosedness? That's where the old subject-object thing is around, and he's trying to define significance and worldhood in such a way that they are so intimately related to Dasein and existing and taking a stand on your being as a way of disclosing, that you can understand how we can all be different and yet be all open. We are all somehow different openings on one world. That's what he has to show. And I think he thinks that he's shown it when he's shown that the ecstatical structure of opening and the horizontal structure of significance are interdefined in such a way, somehow. Yeah, you want to say something about that?
Sides of the same coin, right? So like there's a Dasein side and the world side.
Right. Yeah, that's not right. I take that back.
But it's not even one thing.
Right. So Dasein is being in the world with hyphens, and now having gone through all of this, we have an understanding of what it is to be being in the world, hopefully. And I think that's what he thinks he's doing. Before I call on somebody else, there's a place where he relates it to being in the world, right around here. Is it maybe right exactly here? Let's see. I don't see it right off. So let's whoever's got another hand up. 417, you see it? Okay, maybe having its ground, the world is transcendent. Is it being in the world? Oh, right before that. Oh, good. That's what one would hope to find. Let's read that. The world is already presupposed in one's being alongside the ready-to-hand, concernedly and factically, in one's thematizing and so forth and so forth. That is to say, all these possible ways of being in the world all these are possible ways of being in the world, having its ground in the horizontal unity of ecstatical temporality. The world is transcendent. Good. Yes. Not transcendental, but transcendent, because which is too Kantian, not transcendent in the sense of Husserlian, getting outside your mind, but there's the world, he says, is more outside than anything, and that's when you understand that, you understand how you could be both, have it be its world, have it be you are your world existingly, because they're so interdefined that they're not even like two faces. So we're getting there. Hey, I thought that you would get there eventually, and I would learn a lot. Yeah. No, tell us. I know I'm ready. We can take it. Okay.
Temporality.
Wait, say that again.
Public world, and that there's something like the temporality and temporality that bring together world and Dasein as existence. I thought the world just is that within which we can understand the temporalizing of the world. Everything is brought together. And that what we're trying to bring together is rather entities show up under the fact that Dasein is. So what we're trying to bring together in world is not the two aspects of Dasein, but rather that in world what's brought together is Dasein existence, taking a stand on it. And that would be showing up, sometimes ready to hand, but more problematically, beautifully. And so there's going to be a story about temporality and temporalizing, which brings together in the world all the modes of ready to hand, beautifully, and all the modes of being. That's what's being brought together in the world. We're not trying to bring together the world and Dasein existence. We're trying to bring together Dasein existence and entities showing up. Sometimes it's ready to hand, more problematically, all of this. Entities ready to hand on the basis.
I'm having trouble. I mean, I think it's probably important, and so I want to understand it, but I don't yet. Do you understand how what he's saying differs from what I'm saying? I don't. Well, I mean, what I can't understand you sort of from the start, because he seems to be, the ecstasies are definitely the structure of temporality of Dasein, and he says, and every ecstasis has a horizon. That seems to be, I don't know what it is, but how do you understand it? I mean, I understand it, as I said, it sounds to me like every time I've got a defining to stand on my own being, I've also plugged into some shared stuff. And I don't see him talking about world doing that job. I'm looking at something, the unity of significance, which is the ontological constitution of the world, must be grounded in temporality. Doesn't that seem like the opposite of what you were saying? You seem to be wanting to make world the ultimate thing. That's certainly what he's asking, among other things.
Replacing with entities show up under different modes of being, and united with different.
Now let's look at the crucial quotes. I don't know. The bottom of 4:15, back to that. The question arises how anything like the world in its unity with Dasein is ontologically possible. Is that supporting what you said? Sounds reasonable, yeah.
We're trying to figure out how something like the world in which there are entities.
Yeah, I think so far we're in agreement.
Something like a public world comes together with Dasein perspective on it. Right? That's still all on the side of existence. There's this further question of how entities can be encountered, how to temporalize them, and show up in the multiple modes.
I see, but I'm not sure that's what's happening here. Insofar as, I mean, look at something else here. The top of 4:17. Whereas I'm looking for 4:16, so I can begin there. Okay. The horizontal unity of the schemata of the ecstasies makes possible the primordial way in which the relationship of the in order to are connected with the for the sake of. This implies that on the basis of the horizontal constitution of the ecstatical unity of temporality. That's already strange, isn't it? It looked like the horizon, more basic, is supposed to be the ecstatical, and the horizon is supposed to be connected with each ecstasy, where in italics the condition to the possibility of the world lies in on 4:16. the fact that temporality is an ecstatical unity has something like a horizon. This implies that on the basis of the horizonal constitution of the ecstatical unity of temporality, there belongs to that entity, which is in each case its own there, something like a world that has been disclosed. Boy, that does certainly look like the issue is, I mean, I'm not sure which issue, but I keep wanting to say it looks like the issue is how to get together something like the ownness and the sharedness, and we're just having trouble understanding each other.
There's some Dasein get out of it, they modify. The modification. In which case some Dasein are in their world, in the sense of the modification of the public world. But in both cases, because they've taken a stand to either maintain themselves in the world they want, or they've modified it in the authentic way, you would say Dasein.
But it says Dasein is the world existing. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It says its world. No, you're right. It says does.
Well, there's also places where he says the quality is on the basis of your own. It's not necessarily a hardship.
See, I think you're all on the wrong track. He wouldn't have gone through all this work of bringing in the towards which and the for the sake of which when he talks about the world, and the for the sake of which also when he talks about Dasein taking a stand on its being and getting its identity, if he didn't have as the final agenda the dimensions of Dasein's ecstatical threefold structure, with its for the sake of which amidst and thrown, and the temporal structure of the world, which has in it for the sake of which, lots of for the sake of which is all hooked together into significance and into some past thing. And I mean, he goes to such trouble to lay those two structures out all over the place, and I don't see why he wouldn't be cashing in on that at this point. I want to say something, yeah.
What Heidegger calls the Dasein before then, and then the final for the sake of which he talks about further.
I don't think, I can't, it always bothers me. I don't think death could be the final for the sake of which. That's what Sartre thought Heidegger was saying, and Sartre rightly said, but who in the world would live their life for the sake of their death? That doesn't make any sense. So I think the ultimate for the sake of which has got to be your identity, your defining understanding of who you are, or embodied understanding of whatever it is of who you are. And the fact that the future is a for the sake of which in the world, and is a for the sake of which for each particular Dasein, that's got to be a clue that these two are not even two aspects, as Eugene says, but they're the same thing, taken up by the only thing that could take them up, namely Dasein as being in the world, and that's what he thinks he's done. Okay, we still have. Before we go on, I don't want to come back to anything that I was going to say here, but I think we've gotten to much more serious business. I will tell you in a minute whether I think there's any reason why I have to go back to it. Go ahead, say something, yeah? I like that. My mistake to say aspects. They are the same thing. The for the sake of which, of being a professor. But it's something that is both serving two jobs, namely giving me an identity and giving me lots of equipment to play around with in order to have that identity. Why can't we say that? Those aren't two aspects because there's much more tightly. I couldn't be a professor without this equipment to play around with, and it wouldn't be equipment to be a professor if I didn't have it as my identity. Is that getting it? I think that's the clue that you gave me somewhere along the line. Yeah. 417. Okay.
In the world and objectified.
I want to have to see where you are before I can understand what you're saying. The bottom of 417? Rather, we must ask, is that in the bottom of 417? Oh, yeah, the very, very, very bottom. I got it. Okay. Rather, we must ask what makes it ontologically possible for entities to be encountered within the world and objectified as so encountered. This can be answered by recourse to the transcendence of the world, a transcendence which has an ecstatico-horizontal foundation. Well, that seems awfully important, all right, but let me look at the next paragraph. Everybody read the first paragraph on the top of 418. That's the place where I was looking for being in the world, where being in the world is traced back to the ecstatico-horizontal unity of temporality, the existential ontological possibility of the basic state of Dasein is intelligible. That looks like the bottom line, that you got to understand how being in the world with hyphens can be Dasein and can be the world, all in so much the same thing and yet so different is what he's doing there. I wanted to go back, though, just a little before where Stephen started reading, because there's lots of talk about its world, and that's always a clue that something important is happening. 3 lines down. What is rather the case is that practical Dasein understands itself and its world. So it seems like a perspective. Ecstatically in the unity of the there. See, what is rather the case is that practical Dasein, understanding itself and its world ecstatically in the unity of the there, comes back from these horizons to the entities encountered within them. That's what you're talking about, maybe. The entities get in there. Coming back to these entities understandingly is an existential meaning of letting them be encountered by making them present. That is why we call them entities within the world. So we've gone from its world to the world in sort of the way I would like to do it, but it doesn't happen here. Its world being the world of a professor and the world being the world of a professor. They're the same, and yet they're different. That is why we call these entities within the world. The world is, as it were, already further outside than any object can ever be. That doesn't seem to help. The problem of transcendence cannot be brought around to the question of how a subject, well, that's sure. But we want to know what makes it ontologically possible for entities to be encountered within the world. Well, that doesn't help any. Does it? I don't think so. What's the conclusion you wanted to draw, Stephen? Yes, it does seem to be in a kind of Tyler ballpark where we're talking about the entities in the world. We might as well be talking about the way of being of entities in the world. All I can say about that is that seems to be a sort of spin-off from the more basic problem, which is the problem of how to understand being in the world and how to do it in terms of the ecstasies, which, remember, are the temporal structure of Dasein, and the fact that, the amazing, crucial fact that, every ecstasis has something like a horizon. That horizontal schema, and then let's go on. The schema, I'm back on 416. The schema in which Dasein comes towards itself futurally, whether authentically or inauthentically, is for the sake of itself. The schema in which Dasein is disclosed to itself in a state of mind in Befindlichkeit as thrown is to be taken as that in the faces of which it's been thrown and to which it has been abandoned. That's the characteristic of the what has been. In existing for the sake of itself, in abandonment to itself as something that has been thrown, Dasein as being amidst, is at the same time making present the horizontal structure of presence is defined in order to. He's just bringing together, it looks to me like, the combinations where the temporal future characterizes both Dasein and the world together, and the temporal present the same, and the temporal past the same. And does I get any better? The unity of the horizontal schema of future, past, future, present, and having been is grounded in the ecstatical unity of temporality. Notice the priority of the Dasein way of talking about it. The stand on its own being seems to be what's finally the bottom line. The horizontal temporality as a whole determines upon which factical entities are essentially disclosed. I'm just trying to see whether this is now pro-Tyler, pro-Blattner, pro-Dreyfus. I can't remember. All these positions are sort of merging in my head. Does that what I just read support what I've been saying or not? Let's try, I mean, here's more of the same talk. I marked it all over. On 417, that just as the present arises in the unity of the temporalizing of temporality out of the future and having been, the horizon of presence now we're on the horizon side. That was the ecstasis side. The horizon of the present temporalizes itself equiprimordial with those of future and having been. Insofar as Dasein temporalizes itself, a world is too. In temporalizing itself with regard to its being as temporality, Dasein is essentially in a world by reason of the ecstatico-horizontal constitution of its temporality. I keep wanting to say the real issue seems to be how Dasein can be being in the world. And the issue seems to be to state the threefold structure, both in a world way and in a take a stand on your own being way. And I'm not sure that's a big deal difference.
How does that in the world alongside?
That isn't something that plays a big role in here. It doesn't even get mentioned, does it? Yes, it's right. It's got to be amidst, let's say. Dasein has got to be amidst entities. That's the present structure. And that present structure is, again, both sides. Dasein can't be amidst entities ecstatically if there aren't entities out there to be amidst horizontally. It seems to be the same story again.
Alongside it.
I would have thought the alongsideness has both in it. That is, if you can't be alongside it if it isn't there and if you aren't there.
I mean, roughly, temporality is trying to bring together two things which are at bottom. If they're entities which have reality, and they show up in God under certain levels, right? But it's fundamentally different.
See, yeah, I see what you're doing, and the funny thing is I like it, but I don't think it's the thing to be doing here, to bring in sort of nature and so forth. I mean, here he's talking about equipment, that is, stuff which has its own for the sake of which electrons don't have. And he's putting it that way on purpose so that the two get together. I think he does have I think it's on 414 that he got how entities can show up for pure discovery. That's in the vicinity. That having done that on 414, he goes on to the temporal problem of the transcendence of world, and that seems to me to leave behind the question about electrons.
The problem with transcendence literally emerges.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. I think the question of transcendence is all over the place. In fact, I thought this chapter began with talking about transcendence. Now I don't know.
But there's also I think it's the problem is because we can encounter entities right at home.
That might be true. I find what you're saying perfectly relevant to what's going on page 414, where he's talking about science and the unready to hand and the whole how does the name of this chapter? Let's see whether it's got the temporal meaning of the circumspective concern modified in theoretical discovery. Seems to me that's just one issue, and then there's this issue of the problem of the transcendence of the world. But we've got to stop. I saw one hand that I won't keep people from talking, but it's time by my lights. We've had enough. And I think it's been very helpful. I'm not sure how I'll feel about it tomorrow, but thanks for trying. And the next time, let me just tell you what's happening. See, we're one whole thing behind because I fell into this dark hole, which I now feel I've sort of been pulled out of. We haven't gotten to the ordinary conception of time, which was supposed to be today. So we're going to do the ordinary conception of time next time. You'll be happy to hear, if you're all brave, put up with it. It won't be abstract like this. It's very sort of down-to-earth description of everyday life. You go ahead and leave if you want. I'm going to look at what I said to make sure that I at least said as best I can. I'm not going to say anything more to you all. The lecture is over, but I'm not. I want to check something.